Old Matthew Mall, in a word, was executed for the crime of witchcraft. He was one of the martyrs to that terrible delusion, which should teach us, among its other morals, that the influential classes, and those who take upon themselves to be leaders of the people, are fully liable to all the passionate error that has ever characterized the maddest mob. Clergymen, judges, statesmen, the wisest, calmest, holiest persons of their day, stood in the inner circle round about the gallows, loudest to applaud the work of blood. It was remembered how loudly Colonel Pyncheon had joined in the general cry to purge the land from witchcraft. At the moment of execution, with the halter about his neck, and while Colonel Pyncheon sat on horseback, grimly gazing at the scene, Matthew Mall had addressed him from the scaffold, and uttered a prophecy. "God," said the dying man, pointing his finger with a ghastly look at the undismayed countenance of his enemy, "God will give him blood to drink." After the reputed wizard's death, his humble homestead had fallen an easy spoil into Colonel Pyncheon's grasp. When it was understood, however, that the colonel intended to erect a family mansion, spacious, ponderously framed of oaken timber, and calculated to endure for many generations of his posterity, over the spot first covered by the log-built hut of Matthew Mall, there was much shaking of the head among the village gossips. Without absolutely expressing a doubt whether the stalwart Puritan had acted as a man of conscience and integrity throughout the proceedings which have been sketched, they nevertheless hinted that he was about to build his house over an unquiet grave. But the Puritan soldier and magistrate was not a man to be turned aside from his well-considered scheme either by dread of the wizard's ghost or by flimsy sentimentalities of any kind, however specious. Endowed with common sense, as massive and hard as blocks of granite, fastened together by stern rigidity of purpose, as with iron clamps, he followed out his original design, probably without so much as imagining an objection to it. On the score of delicacy, or any scrupulousness which a finer sensibility might have taught him, the colonel, like most of his breed and generation, was impenetrable. He therefore dug his cellar, and laid the deep foundations of his mansion on the square of earth whence Matthew Mall, 40 years before, had first swept away the fallen leaves. It was a curious and, as some people thought, an ominous fact that very soon after the workmen began their operations, the spring of water above mentioned entirely lost the deliciousness of its pristine quality. Whether its sources were disturbed by the depth of the new cellar, or whatever subtler cause might lurk at the bottom, it is certain that the water of Mall's well, as it continued to be called, grew hard and brackish. It may be deemed singular that the head carpenter of the new edifice was no other than the son of the very man from whose dead grip the property of the soil had been wrested. Not improbably he was the best workman of his time, or perhaps the colonel thought it expedient, or was impelled by some better feeling, thus openly to cast aside all animosity against the race of his fallen antagonist. At all events, Thomas Mall became the architect of the house of the Seven Gables, and performed his duty so faithfully that the timber framework fastened by his hands still holds together. Thus the great house was built. Familiar as it stands in its rusty old age, it is therefore only the more difficult to imagine the bright novelty with which it first caught the sunshine. The impression of its actual state at this distance darkens inevitably through the picture which we would fain give of its appearance on the morning when the Puritan magnate bade all the town to be his guests.